When you got up this morning and you were getting ready for church, did you think to yourself, I wonder what Robin's going to talk about today? Was your answer manure? I mean, not content, I mean the actual thing I'm going to talk about. Because I am. Today's message is all about manure because, see, I think manure is a central feature of this story that Jesus tells. It's the most important feature of the story that Jesus tells, in fact. It's critical to the story. So Jesus is talking to some people and he tells this little story. And he says, there's a guy who owns a vineyard. So right away, you already know that person is rich. They're well off. Because they not only own a vineyard, they apparently also own fig trees in it. And apparently they own a gardener too. Or maybe he's rented, I don't know. But he has a fig tree, and the fig tree has not produced figs for 3 years. And so he wants to cut it down. And the gardener says, no, hang on a second. Let me dig around it. I'll throw some manure on it. We'll see in a year. How about that? The end. That's the end of the story. I didn't cut it off at an odd verse. That is actually the end of the story. Jesus doesn't say what happens. So right away, you should have some questions. You should have some questions like, did the landowner let him do it? Or did he still tell him to cut it down? You should have some questions like, the landowner obviously doesn't know anything about trees, right? I mean, come on. Doesn't everybody know that a fig tree takes at least 3 to 5 years to produce figs? Did anybody know that? I had to look it up. But it's true. Fig trees take at least 3 to 5 years to produce fruit. So he wasn't even actually into the zone of when it might actually produce fruit yet. The gardener knows, though, because the gardener says, oh, hang on, give me a chance. But again, we don't know. We don't know whether the landowner says yes or no, and we don't know whether the gardener takes care of it and then it produces figs, yay, or the gardener takes care of it, it doesn't produce any figs, and it gets cut down. We don't know. Which right away ought to tell you that the point of the parable isn't result. The point of the parable is action. And what's the most important part of that action? You're right, it's manure. We're going to talk about manure today, and because I'm going to talk about manure in a couple of different contexts, I will try my best to always say the word manure, and not any other words we might normally in those contexts replace it with. I don't want to get in trouble. Jesus tells a story about someone who owns land on which there is a tree that is not producing, and he wants to cut it down. The gardener wants to save it. So a traditional understanding of this parable, quite often for people, is God is the landowner, you are the tree, Jesus is the gardener. That seems to make sense, doesn't it? Except, not only is the landowner not aware of his creation enough to know that it takes 3 to 5 years to produce figs on a fig tree, but is vengeful enough to want to kill it. Oh, wait. Is that God for you? And sure, the gardener knows about digging around the tree and aerating the soil and throwing some manure on there. But shouldn't the gardener have already been taking care of the tree in the first place? Shouldn't the gardener's answer have been, no, hang on, I'll take care of it and we'll see? Shouldn't it have been, it takes 3 to 5 years to produce fruit. Give it a few more years. Be patient. And if you're the tree, you're literally a lump of wood. Unthinking, unknowing. Even if someone talks to you to help you grow. How about we look at the story a little bit differently, and instead of focusing on the characters in the story, first, let's focus on what's actually going on in the story. Let's talk manure here. So what happens in the story is very clear. In order for the tree to grow and produce fruit, it needs something. It needs, for the soil to be aerated, it needs manure. Now, right away, you're probably thinking to yourself, obviously, fertilizer, it means fertilizer. By the way, the most accurate literal translation of the ancient Greek word that's used in this story to describe that is, in fact, manure. It's not fertilizer. They wouldn't have known what that was. It's manure in all its glory. Now, the tricky thing about that is, clearly the point of the story is that the tree requires nurture. But you know, we say manure in a lot of different contexts now. In fact, we tend to describe what politicians say as shoveling manure. Celebrities are constantly shilling manure. And corporations will pile it on in order to get you to buy their product. They'll tell you stuff, and politicians won't even just shovel the manure. They're making it up on the spot. They're actually producers. That's the way we use that now, isn't it? In fact, sometimes when we've had a really hard day, we say we've been buried under a pile of manure. It is. We use it in a very negative way. Of course we do, because we know what it is. Ick. And if you're me, for instance, and I spend a fair bit of my time driving between here and Bashaw and here, down that highway, there are farmers who, at certain times of the year, are spreading a load of manure. And the smell is horrifying to me. I know, I grew up in a city. Fine, whatever. But, it'll burn your nose hairs and cause your eyes to water. No kidding. And it gets in the car and then it stays, right? Even you're kilometers past where it was and it's still in the car. But you know why they're doing it. They're making the ground better, to grow better, to help the things that are planted there to grow. That's why they're doing it. Tell me why politicians are doing it. Tell me why businesses and corporations will do it in order to get you to buy their product. Oh, that's why. Okay, yeah. They're selling you something, and they'll tell you whatever you need to know in order to get you to buy it. That ain't the kind of manure that's in this story, is it? The kind of manure that's in this story is the kind that provides essential nutrients, that provides warmth and nurture and nourishment, that provides all of the things that you need to grow. So I think the key question that you ought to be asking yourself after this story isn't all of those other questions about the story, it's a question about you. What are you shoveling? What are you spreading into the world around you? Ooh, I did pretty good so far saying manure all the time, didn't I? Okay. Because we do both. Yes, we do. Even if you try not to, you do. But I think that's a question Jesus would have asked them after he told this story. He would have left it hanging there and they would have said, but what happens? What happens next? And he would have said, well, that's up to you, isn't it? Because it depends on what you're shoveling into the world around you. Are you helping people grow? Are you providing them with support? What are you doing to do that? To cause the world around you to grow? Now, that would be fine, all well and good, if we were just letting the parable stand alone by itself as a story. Except Jesus never tells a parable to stand alone by itself just as a story. Nothing ever begins from Jesus as, here's a good story. There's always a point to it because that's a point of parables. It's to enlighten and illuminate whatever it is Jesus is talking about. And what is he talking about? Well, it's a little bit confusing because what happens right before Jesus tells this parable, what causes him to tell the parable in the first place, is current events. The people that are talking to Jesus bring up something that happened just the other day in the first century. So we don't get it. We hear all that stuff that comes before, something about Galileans, I don't know, and Pilate. Oh, Pilate, we know Pilate. What's happened is Pilate, the Roman governor, has captured some Galileans who did something, and for some reason, they are being punished. Not only are they being punished by being executed, it's worse than that. They're suggesting that Pilate used their blood in Roman rituals, which would be devastating to Galileans. Not just the death, but what happened after. And of course, Jesus immediately goes, so are you bringing that up because you're wondering if they deserved that? Because remember from some of the other stories of Jesus, we've very definitely learned that in those days, people believed that bad things happened to you because you did something bad, and God is punishing you. And I think it's a key part of Jesus' ministry that is often set to the side, but I think a key part of Jesus' ministry is to say, no, that's not how that works. It isn't. Bad things don't happen to you because you did something bad. You're not being punished for just being you. In fact, he gives them a counterexample. Just the other day, there was an accident in Jerusalem, and the tower that they were building fell, and people were killed. It was an accident, but people died. So do you think they were being punished? No. The point of those stories, those current event stories, is that we all die, and we die in different ways. And we don't know when that's going to be. And some of those ways are horrifying. You could put this story in a more contemporary context, couldn't you? In a lot of ways. Right now, you might suggest that some terrorists from Hamas went into Israel and killed a bunch of people. Did those people deserve to die? No, they did not. But Israel struck back and killed a bunch of Palestinians. Did those people deserve to die? No, they didn't. So what's the point of that then? Well, I think the point that Jesus is trying to make is that it isn't about how they died, it's about how they might have lived. It's about how we live. And if we live in repentance, I'm coming back to that in a second, if we live in repentance, we can change that. We can't change the death part, but we can change how we get there. We can make things different by living into repentance. Repentance is a theme in the Gospel of Luke. It's an ongoing theme through Luke. And what's most important about it is the reason it's an ongoing theme for Luke is that we misunderstand repentance. We think repentance is say sorry, stop behaving that way. And Jesus says that's not repentance at all. Of course you should. Of course you should change your behavior if it's bad, but the point isn't your behavior, the point is you. And if you are living into repentance, you are, I know I've said it 1,000 times before, pardon me for being an Anglican in a previous life, turn from your wickedness and live. Remember I've said that before? It's an old, very old Anglican prayer. There's this phrase in it about repentance that goes that we should turn from our wickedness and live. That's Jesus' point. That's repentance. It's not just about stop the negative behavior, stop the bad behavior, stop doing the killing, stop doing the sinning part, whatever that is. But you can't just stop that. You have to do something. You have to live into the good that was in you from the beginning. That's the manure. When you live into the good that is in you and you spread that into the world, you are nurturing the world around you. You are bringing growth to it. You are helping it to grow. Is that sharing of your goodness into the world, is your spreading of the manure contingent on what you're going to get back? Is it conditional? Because if it is, you're not spreading the right manure. That's why the story doesn't have an ending. Because the gardener doing that isn't conditional on whether or not the tree produces figs at all. It's about the care. It's about the love. It's about the grace. The gardener at least has the patience to wait. So go back to the story for a second, and now think about who you might be in the story. Are you somebody who's very well off by yourself, and so you don't really care about the world around you because you don't have to, like the landowner? You don't want to know that it takes 3 to 5 years to produce figs? Are you a gardener who likes to care for other people? Because if you are, you've already done that first step of you must care for yourself, right? In order to care for others. Or are you the tree that's in need of care? Because sometimes we are. We need the care. And we look for the gardeners around us to help us. I think Jesus has a very definite idea of what repentance is, and it's not religion's understanding of repentance. It's about how we live. The reason Jesus uses the language of repentance is because for most it will involve change. And that change isn't that you stop behaving a certain way and start behaving differently. He certainly talks about that a lot. It's about what you live into the world being from your heart. That's where the manure comes from. That sounds wrong on so many levels, but it's true. What you spread into the world around you, what creates love and grace for you and for the world around you, that encourages others to love and care and offer kindness, to grow into what they are supposed to be. It comes from your heart, not your behavior. That's why Jesus leaves the story right there. It's the action. So, we all need to aerate the soil around us and spread some manure. Are you ready?